In 2019, a billionaire sex offer died in a federal cell that was supposed to be escape-proof. Cameras failed. Guards slept. The body vanished from public view within hours. Officials called it suicide. Millions did not believe them. Because Jeffrey Epstein was never just a predator. He was a node. Ghislaine Maxwell, British socialite and daughter of a suspected intelligence asset, was not just his girl fry. She was his recruiter, his organizer, his social passport into the worlds that are never photographed. Presidents, princes, bankers, scientists, weapons dealers, people whose secrets are state-level currency. The official story says this was a private sex trafficking ring. The unofficial story suggests something darker, a blackmail machine built with intelligence fingerprints all over it. Here is how that suspicion was born, and why it refuses to die. The anomaly began with access. Epstein appeared in the 1980s from almost nowhere. No elite degree, no family fortune. Yet he moved billions for clients who did not like questions. He flew on private jets, bought a private island, and surrounded himself with underage girls that powerful men somehow kept visiting. Ghislaine Maxwell, trained from childhood in the etiquette of the ultra-rich, connected him into circles where cameras are usually banned and reputations are priceless. On paper, this was just wealth and depravity. But in the shadows of intelligence history, there is a pattern. From the 1950s onward, agencies from the CIA to the KGB used sex, hidden cameras, and ComD officials as tools. They called it honey trapping. The goal was simple: film a target doing something that would destroy them if exposed, then use that fear to steer policy, TS, contracts, and silence. Epstein's world looked uncomfortably similar. By the early 2000s, girls who had worked for Epstein began to talk. They described a conveyor belt of abuse, teenagers recruited at malls and schools, D-money, massages, modeling, then trapped. Maxwell, they said, was the one who groomed them. She taught them how to please older men, how to keep quiet, how to normalize the horror. Some of those older men were famous. Some worked in finance. Some worked in politics. One by one, SurveyRS named names. In 2008, law enforcement had Epstein cornered in Florida. Dozens of accusers, evidence of trafficking. The kind of case that usually sat in decades behind bars. Instead, something extraordinary happened. A secret plea deal was cut. Epstein pleaded guilty to minor charges. He served a little over a year, allowed out on work release for up to 12 hours a day. The federal investigation was shut down. His co-conspirators were granted immunity. The prosecutor, Alexander Acosta, later told transition officials that he had been told Epstein belonged to intelligence. That phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. Belong to whom? The CIA? A foreign service? A hybrid network that crosses borders and answers to no one? No documents have surfaced to prove it. But the pattern of protection repeated. After his Florida conviction, Epstein should have been a pariah. Instead, he kept flying with billionaires and politicians. He kept receiving visits from scientists funded by defense money. He kept hosting parties where phones were banned and where, according to multiple accounts, cameras were not. In Intelligence S, physical space is a weapon. Epstein's properties were perfect instruments. The New York townhouse with hidden rooms and strange electronics. The ranch in New Mexico, miles from prying eyes. The island in the Caribbean, reachable only by private aircraft or yacht. Staff later described security cameras everywhere. Some said they saw a room filled with screens. If true, it would mirror classic blackmails run by authoritarian regimes. Lure the target, record the act, store the leverage. Then there is Ghislaine Maxwell's lineage. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was a media tycoon who died mysteriously in 1991. found floating near his yacht. After his death, investigators discovered a financial black hole and links to multiple intelligence services. Former officials from Israel, Britain, and Eastern Europe described him as an asset, a man who traded information in exchange for power and protection. His daughter grew up in that world. She knew how secrets move. She knew what they are worth. By the mid-2000s, Epstein's network looked less like a lone predator's playground and more like a point between money, politics, and covert influence. He funded scientists working on cutting-edge research. He donated to universities that host defense projects. He met with former intelligence officials. Some called him a useful connector. Others quietly refused to be in the same room. Then, in 2019, the wall cracked. Epstein was arrested again, this time in New York, on federal sex trafficking charges. The indictment was explosive. It named dozens of victims. It described a pattern of recruitment, grooming, and exploitation that had gone on for years. It hinted at powerful men, but did not name most of them. For the first time, there was a chance that a courtroom, under oath, might reveal who had been protected and why. That chance died in August. Epstein was found dead in his cell. The official report said suicide by hanging. But the cameras outside his cell were not recording. The guards who were supposed to check on him every 30 minutes claimed they fell asleep and falsified records. The autopsy report was disputed by an outside pathologist who said some injuries were more consistent with strangulation. The body was quickly removed, buried, and sealed behind layers of legal and institutional closure. In intelligence terms, this looked like a COMD asset being neutralized before he could talk. No proof, only patterns. But those patterns matched decades of history. When blackmail S go wrong, loose S are tied off. Witnesses recant. Files disappear. People die suddenly. Official explanations appear, neat and incomplete. Ghislaine Maxwell became the last visible piece. She vanished from public view after Epstein's first conviction. For years, journalists and investigators tried to find her. She surfaced briefly in photographs, then disappeared again. Some speculated she was being protected. Others believed she was negotiating with unseen handlers, trading silence for safety. In 2020, she was finally arrested. The indictment painted her as Epstein's enabler, recruiter, and co-conspirator. Yet even in custody, the investigation seemed carefully fenced. Prosecutors focused on a narrow set of victims and years. Many alleged visitors to Epstein's properties were never called to testify. Flight logs listing famous names were treated like embarrassing gossip, not leads in a potential blackmail. Behind the S, intelligence veterans watched with unease. They knew how often agencies had used criminal networks as tools. In the 1970s, congressional investigations revealed how the CIA had partnered with mafia figures for assassination attempts. In later decades, drug traffickers were allowed to operate in exchange for information. In some countries, security services ran brothels and sex rings to calm judges and ministers. The line between law enforcement and exploitation had been crossed so many times that it was no longer clearly visible. The question was not whether intelligence agencies could run something like Epstein's network. History showed they could. The question was whether they did, and if so, who authorized it. Was Epstein a free agent who learned the methods and built his own empire of calm? Was he quietly recruited by a service that saw his depravity as an opportunity? Or was he a shared asset, tolerated by multiple services because his files were too valuable to shut down? Consider the incentives. A single video of a senior lawmaker with an underage girl could influence a TE on sanctions, surveillance laws, or defense contracts. A tape of a central banker in a compromising position could steer monetary decisions. Photos of a tech billionaire on Epstein's island could shape how their platforms respond to government pressure. In a world where information is power, this kind of leverage is almost priceless. Now imagine those files scattered across private safes, offshore servers, and intelligence archives. Some controlled by governments, some by rogue operators, some by people whose names we will never know. Each image, each video, a silent weapon waiting for the right moment. This is where the story stops being about Epstein and Maxwell and becomes about the structure that may have used them. Intelligence services are designed to operate in the gray zone between law and necessity. They recruit criminals. They run covert schemes. They justify it as protecting national security. But once a blackmail network exists, it does not care about flags. It cares about control. If Epstein's was, in whole or in part, an intelligence-linked blackmail program, then the implications are chilling. It would mean that some of the people making decisions about war, surveillance, finance, and technology may have done so under invisible coercion. It would mean that elections, policies, and corporate strategies were not just shaped by lobbying and ideology, but by secret shame locked in digital vaults. Even if no agency ever formally ran Epstein, the failure to fully expose his network serves the same function as a cover artists are still fighting for recognition. Many alleged clients remain unnamed. Maxwell's trial, while significant, was tightly circumscribed. No intelligence officials were called. No serious inquiry into possible state involvement was allowed to unfold in public, so we are left with fragments, flight logs, testimony from traumatized women, hints from officials like Acosta, the documented history of intelligence services using sex and blackmail, the convenient death of the central figure, the limited scope of the only major trial, a pattern of protection that looks less like incompetence and more like design. You are not required to believe that the CIA or any specific agency built Epstein's world from scratch. But it is difficult to look at the record and believe that this was only about one man's perversion and one woman's loyalty. There sat at the intersection of money, power, and secrecy. That intersection is exactly where intelligence agencies live. The deeper question is what this says about the hidden architecture of modern power. If networks like this can exist for decades, protected until they become impossible to ignore, what else is running in the right now? Which philanthropic foundations, tech conferences, or private retreats are actually recruitment grounds? Which scandals never reach the news because someone, somewhere, plays a video and reminds a leader what they stand to lose? This account is built from court records, survey testimony, investigative reporting, and declassified histories of intelligence blackmail-s. It cannot answer the question that matters most. Who, exactly, held the leverage when Epstein and Maxwell were in their prime? But it can show you the shape of the machine they may have been part of. Now bring it into your own world. When you see a powerful figure suddenly reverse a position, push an unpopular law, or escape consequences that would destroy anyone else, do you assume it is just politics? Or do you wonder what is on the unseen tape? If you had to choose, would you rather live in a world where this was all a chaotic accident, or one where hidden operators are deliberately pulling strings? Type A if you think Epstein was a lone predator protected by incompetence and money. Type B if you believe he was part of an organized blackmail system tied to intelligence. Then check the comments to see which reality most people think they are living in.